Greetings, this is Andrew Eblin, and today I am going to talk about a very interesting subject phenomenon. I am here to talk to you about the so called paranormal and supernatural and why there is much logical evidence for this certain subject matter. While many would consider it to be folly, I have much logical evidence and valid points to help one come to their own conclusion. Now, many would ask what I exactly believe in. I personally believe in using reason to discover the truth and think things through. For myself, I believe in being open minded and yet at the same time showing healthy skepticism. I try to look at different points of view and see what everyone has to say and look at different viewpoints before coming to the conclusion, and this is how science and skepticism should work. However, many self identified skeptics and intellectuals do not do this. Rather, they stick to a strict set of dogmas and they will not even think of reconsidering their point of view or listening to anyone else that might have something else to say. I have known some people that were very skeptical of the paranormal, or most anything for that matter. I knew this one skeptic that was very extreme. He didn't believe or trust in anything, not God, theoretical physics, science, philosophy, or even love. So I thought I'd test him to see how limited and narrow minded he was. I said, "Hey there, do you ever watch those science fiction programs? You think we'll master the forces of gravity and see humans living on the moon? Can you see people turning lasers into deadly weapons? What about teleportation?" So the skeptic replied back, "There you go again, living in a fantasy world with elves, dwarves, and pink unicorns." Then I interjected, "Well, wait a minute. Scientists are experimenting with lasers and anti-gravity right now, with impressive results. You truly think that nothing will ever come of it?" The skeptic said I was seriously delusional. I have given this matter some great thought, and it occurred to me that the paranormal is considered magic and supernatural until it is rediscovered by science and labeled as something else. Here is an example as far back Here is an example. As far back as the 18th century, patients relied on physicians to help them feel better when they got sick. However, in those days, they didn't have the wide array of medicines and prescription drugs that we have today. Often there was nothing more that the doctors could do. So when people begged for help, doctors would give the patients sugar pills with no medicinal value whatsoever. Of course, the patient believed these pills had healing properties. What amazed the physician was the quickened healing rate of the patients that had ingested the fake pills. Later scientific researchers discovered that people given fake acupuncture by untrained volunteers did better than those that didn't. The same is told of people in the hospital. People will be told they're being given special medicine in their IV bag when it is really saline solution. The same is theorized to happen when people go to faith healers and actually feel better. So with this process occurring, scientists had to come up with a name for this amazing self-healing ability. So what should they call it? Should they name it the mystical magical power of people believing in things that don't exist? That would be a good description, but it would be very embarrassing to the scientists, many of whom are ardent skeptics. Well, maybe we wouldn't have to mention magic. Why don't we call it mind over matter? Because that would pretty much sum it up, right? If people believe something will heal them, they show improvement. But what if it is widely believed that people could heal themselves by thinking positively and have to see a physician less and only for serious injuries? So that's a lousy idea, labeling it that because it's bad for business. I know. Let's call it self hypnosis or auto suggestion. Oops! We can't do that either because for the longest time, dogmatic skeptics have been strenuously trying to convince everyone that hypnosis was fake and is part of the realm of magic, superstition, and fantasy. Finally, a clever researcher found the perfect nondescriptive name phrase: the placebo effect. Placebo is a Latin phrase meaning "I shall please." It's quite vague, and nowhere near does it lend credit to the amazing power of the human mind. The experts of science and medicine are in denial that there can be no doubt of the mystical and magical placebo effect having many benefits and being very powerful. It's so trouble that it interferes with routine scientific experiments. Have you ever heard of a double blinded study? Whenever there is a new promising drug, scientists have to do this to make sure there is no chance of the placebo effect taking place. Let's say you have two groups, one given the test drug and another given the sugar pills. It's very important those administering the drugs don't know which is which so they don't show much enthusiasm or lack thereof and influence the minds of the test patients and thus ruining the results. You know that pesky positive attitude creeping in there again? So there is an overseer who marks the pills ahead of time, and he or she only knows which is which. And here is something else to consider. Besides body language, eye contact, and voice inflections giving one away, there is that subtle psychic component. Along with all the sensory cues we get flooded into our consciousness every day, there is always our psychic intuition. Some listen to it, some don't. The big lie that has been fostered by skeptics and debunkers is that psychic phenomena is unnatural or supernatural in matter. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite is true. Telepathy or thought transmission will never be proven in a lab experiment because the person promoting themselves has a psychic talent no greater than anyone else. We are all centers and receivers, and the intent of each and every person in the experiment would have to be taken into account for. For example, if I were to put $1 million and say, okay, psychic, prove your supernatural abilities and it's all yours, you'd have to realize that at least subconsciously I'm going to be opposed to achieving that goal, and my thoughts will affect the outcome of the test. Skeptical? Well, just think of it as the so called placebo effect. One might ask, is there any other way to prove the existence of telepathy using the scientific method? The answer to the question is yes. When there is a strong link or biological connection, for example, in studies on identical twins with 100% matching genes and chromosomes, I knew this pair of twins that would always finish each other's sentences and thoughts. It was very amusing, and it reminded me of two identical tuning forks. You strike one, and the other, while several feet away from it, will also vibrate because they are on a sympathetic wavelength. In the University of Minnesota, there is being done this very important study on identical twins. I will give you one case study. If you wish to learn more, I recommend you do further research yourself. The study I'm going to tell you about is a story of Jim Lewis and Jim Springer. Both twins were separated at birth and both adopted by different families in Ohio and lived 45 miles away from one another. As the twins grew older, both sets of parents told them that they had a twin brother, but Springer's mom told him his brother was dead. However, Lewis went to the courthouse and found his brother's address. They nervously got together over 30 years after they had been separated. Shortly after meeting and reuniting, they were soon inducted into the university study. Here's what they found. Both had been named James by their adopted parents. Both had been married twice, first to a woman named Linda and a second named Betty. Both had sons named James Allen. Both had at one time a dog named Toy. Both chain smoked and liked beer. Both had woodworking shops in their garage. Both had served as sheriff's deputies in nearby Ohio towns. Both vacationed on the same beach in the Florida Gulf Coast. Both lived on the only house on their block. The results of the test conducted by Dr. Thomas Bashar of the University of Minnesota were astonishing. Both Jims had high blood pressure, both had vasectomies, and both suffered severe migraine headaches. Brainwave tests produced results that looked the exact same, and when they measured personality variables, they were surprised by the similarities in the results. Now, now, I'm sure many psychology students were surprised because this study seems to answer the age old question: nature versus nurture. In other words, are we byproducts of our environment, as B.F. Skinner suggested, or does heredity play a larger role in shaping our personalities? It seems that we have underestimated the role of genes and chromosomes. What amazes me is that students and teachers alike will ignore the fact that in the study the twins shared an extraordinary psychic connection. Naming your dog Toy, getting a vasectomy, and working as a sheriff's deputy is not a peculiarity written in your genes. And when the very strange and the same very strange occurrences happen in dozens of cases of reunited twins, that is not anecdotal evidence. It is a behavioral pattern. Let me conclude that the scientific does not work very well when the same people conducting the experiment are biased. The majority of scientists, which are dogmatic skeptics, are unlikely to consider empirical evidence supporting magic, thought transference, and synchronicity. It's not an issue of evidence, it's an issue of personal and cultural bias. Thank you for listening.